Our topic today is the effects of upper-level mean-state wind bias on waveguide, forcing, and seasonal prediction of the Silk Road pattern. This is a story about how we try to predict the atmospheric Silk Road pattern over Eurasia better. This work is carried out by myself, Professor Chi-Yong Tam, and Professor Zhen Lao from the Chinese University of Hong Kong in China, Dr. Su Jin Song from the APEC Climate Center in South Korea, Professor Zhongbei An from the Pusan National University, also in South Korea, and Dr. Christopher O'Reilly from the University of Oxford in the UK. This work is also published in two papers, namely Potential Predictability of the Silk Road Pattern and the Role of Sea Surface Temperature as inferred from seasonal hindcast experiments of a coupled climate model, and Forcing Mechanism of the Silk Road Pattern and the sensitivity of Rossby wave source hotspots to mean state winds. Over summertime Eurasia, the Silk Road pattern is the leading mode of variability in upper-level meridional wind, as shown in A for reanalysis. It consists of alternating southerlies and northerlies and is a Rossby wave along the Asian jet. The Asian jet is shown in A by the black contour and is represented by the upper-level climatological zonal wind. The Silk Road pattern also controls surface temperature and rainfall over Eurasia, so seasonal prediction of the Silk Road pattern has immense societal impacts. Our Pusan National University coupled climate model can capture the spatial pattern of the Silk Road pattern, as shown in B for the seasonal hindcast. For example, the ensemble mean clearly captures the 5 centers of action from Europe to Western North Pacific. However, our hindcast cannot predict the temporal phase of the Silk Road pattern. Panel C shows the Silk Road pattern time series in reanalysis and in hindcast. The two lines show little correlation, doesn't it? In fact, many other climate models also cannot predict the Silk Road pattern. Not being able to predict the associated surface temperature and rainfall poses a serious problem to the society. So, we investigate how to better predict the Silk Road pattern. Our research question is, why can't we predict the Silk Road pattern? Since seasonal prediction skill mainly comes from sea surface temperature, we look at the sea surface temperature associated with the Silk Road pattern. As highlighted by the black box in panel A, reanalysis Silk Road pattern is more associated with North Atlantic sea surface temperature anomaly. But as highlighted by the black box in B, our hindcast Silk Road pattern is more associated with tropical Pacific. We then construct two sea surface temperature time series based on these two boxes. Reanalysis Silk Road pattern correlates significantly with the North Atlantic sea surface temperature, but does not correlate with tropical Pacific. However, hindcast Silk Road pattern correlates significantly with the tropical Pacific, but does not correlate with the North Atlantic. As sea surface temperature is typically the major source of prediction skill, this incorrect sea surface temperature relationship may be causing the poor Silk Road pattern prediction. Next, we use the concept of potential predictability as another way to look at the sea surface temperature relationship. What is potential predictability? It describes the extent that future conditions can be predicted by comparing the signal to the noise in an ensemble system. While the signal is common in all ensemble members, the noise is different in all members due to atmospheric internal variability. For example, if a location has a big signal and a small noise, then the location is potentially predictable. Panel A shows the potential predictability of upper-level meridional wind in our hindcast ensemble. Potential predictability decreases with latitude, as the mid-latitude is typically harder to predict than the tropics. In the mid-latitude, locations with higher potential predictability compared to the zonal mean coincides with the Silk Road pattern in gray contours. When we remove the Silk Road pattern from our hindcast ensemble by means of regression, locations of reduced potential predictability in panel B again coincide with the Silk Road pattern. When we repeat the calculation using sea surface temperature in panel C, potential predictability in tropical Pacific is reduced when Silk Road pattern is removed. So, the potential predictability of our hindcast Silk Road pattern is related to tropical Pacific sea surface temperature. So far, we have shown that the Silk Road pattern is associated with North Atlantic sea surface temperature in reanalysis, but incorrectly with tropical Pacific in the hindcast. So, what is causing this incorrect sea surface temperature relationship? Within the seasonal timescale in panel A, hindcast develops upper-level jet bias. The hindcast bias is in shadings and the reanalysis jet is in black contours. The bias is strong and reaches half of the climatological jet speed. Jet bias may affect the waveguide and Rossby wave propagation like the Silk Road pattern. For example, in panel B, it shows the reanalysis wave number 5 waveguide in black contour. Although the waveguide is continuous between the North Atlantic jet and the Asian jet in reanalysis, in panel C, it is discontinuous in the hindcast. This may obstruct wave propagation of Silk Road pattern triggered from the North Atlantic. We hypothesize that this waveguide bias reduces Silk Road pattern prediction skill. And to test our hypothesis, we perform wave-making experiments using an idealized biotropic model. The model is prescribed with two different upper-level mean state winds, namely from reanalysis and from our climate model. We then add a small forcing to trigger Rossby wave and then analyze the steady state response. For example, in panel A, we apply a forcing over the Indian subcontinent on top of reanalysis mean state wind. Silk Road pattern is triggered downstream. The panel below shows the eastward propagation of the wave reaching steady state. In B, we apply the same forcing, but on top of hindcast mean state wind. The wave phase is now different to the Silk Road pattern. For example, the phase over the East China Sea is obviously opposite. This example shows that the upper level wind bias in hindcast substantially changes the propagation of the Silk Road pattern. Next, we systematically investigate the effect of wind bias on all forcings, not just limited to the Indian subcontinent. For each mean state wind, we perform close to 1,000 experiments, each with a forcing at a different location. Together, the whole globe is covered systematically by the forcings. We then look at the wave response of each experiment and decide if that forcing can trigger the Silk Road pattern. For each mean state, we obtain all the forcings that can trigger the Silk Road pattern. In panel A, for the experiments with reanalysis mean state, forcings that can trigger the Silk Road pattern are stronger over the North Atlantic and weaker over the tropical Pacific. This experimental result explains why in panel B, reanalysis Silk Road pattern is more associated with North Atlantic sea surface temperature than with the tropical Pacific. In C, for the experiments with hindcast mean state, the waveguide bias changes the characteristics of the Silk Road pattern forcing. It is now weaker over the North Atlantic, but stronger over the tropical Pacific. This experimental result explains why, in panel D, hindcast Silk Road pattern is more associated with tropical Pacific sea surface temperatures than with the North Atlantic. Finally, to answer our question, why can't we predict the Silk Road pattern? Our answer is that the prediction skill is reduced by the upper level mean state wind bias in our climate model. While we have only analyzed one climate model, our results may have wider implications. Many other climate models also have mean state wind biases. Hence, similar bias may also reduce the prediction skill of the Silk Road pattern in other models. To summarize, I hope we all agree that for better prediction of the Silk Road pattern, it is important to improve the model mean state. Further details are documented in our 2 publications below. Please feel free to email me or follow my work Twitter account if you have any questions. Thank you.